Tonight on the Daily Wrap, 1 week after the mass shooting at an Oregon campus, President Obama visits with the victims' families. But is there a political angle to this as well? And the search to replace Speaker Boehner continues. Could Paul Ryan be stepping up? Plus, Hillary Clinton is having trouble with men. Not the first time. And the Obama administration is finally admitting a foreign policy failure. This is the Daily Wrap, live from New York City. And welcome to the show, everybody. Nomi Conch joins us once again. I am Joe Concha. 3 nights in a row.
Yeah.
You update your LinkedIn page to show you are now a co-host of the Daily Wrap, at least for 60 more minutes before the great Rick
yell
Unger.
At me.
Rick doesn't yell, of course not. He'll
Not
be
at
back
all.
on Monday. He's out in Los Angeles at Politicon.
I know. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, get them while they're hot.
We got to end on that note.
They've got to send me something for that.
To Miss Ticketmaster's
$10.
right. She's an attorney and a senior fellow at the Independent Women's Forum. Gail Trotter is back as well. And finally, he's a Newsmax TV contributor and a writer for National Review Online. John Fund is here once again. Okay, we have all veterans here, so let's get right to the Daily Download. And 1 week after the mass shooting at an Oregon college campus, President Obama traveled to the city of Roseburg today to meet with the families of the 9 victims. The president has been quite outspoken about stronger gun legislation and has even expressed his frustration with the seemingly never-ending school shootings. But White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest insists that this trip will not be political.
Well, the president is planning to travel to Oregon on Friday morning. I would not anticipate much of a public appearance from the president. The stated purpose of his trip is to spend some time with the families there that have been affected by this outrageous act of violence.
Okay, but some sort of legislation reform is in the works, right?
I don't have a time frame for if or when any additional executive actions might be taken. There are some common sense things that Congress could do to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and others who shouldn't have them. That in a way that doesn't undermine the constitutional rights of law-abiding Americans.
Well, it looks like that additional executive action might be taken sooner than Mr. Earnest thinks. This after a Washington Post is reporting that President Obama is, quote, seriously considering circumventing Congress with his executive authority and imposing new background check requirements for buyers who purchase weapons from high-volume gun dealers. Also, according to the Post, the proposed change would require any and all gun dealers who exceed a certain number of sales each year to obtain a license from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, and those dealers would also be required to perform background checks on potential buyers. Okay, so first, what do you make of the president's visit? And will things get political? Because everything gets political.
Everything gets political. When you have 1 mass shooting a day, now we had 2 school shootings today alone.
Yeah.
When you have 1 mass shooting a day, 3 school shootings in the past week, 1 gun violent shooting, murder, an hour in America, we really have to do something about this. There's no better time to be political. This is how change happens. We elect our leaders to protect people for a reason. The problem is that Congress is controlled by NRA, which is controlled by gun manufacturers who are pumping money into NRA. And the majority of Americans, 90% of Americans, including NRA members, Republicans, Independents, Democrats, want to close these loopholes out. There's no reason that we have universal background checks that don't cover gun sales at these gun shows. It's just ridiculous. You shouldn't be selling machine guns to 18-year-olds who have criminal records. That shouldn't happen, and it is.
John, I can appreciate Nomi's point, and certainly with all these shootings that we've seen this week, you could see where the momentum from those looking for gun control to obviously make their argument, as Nomi just did. But is executive action, is that the way to go here? Is that setting a dangerous precedent?
I've never owned a gun. I don't plan to. But my sister lives in Oregon. I was visiting her this week, and I talked with several of the people. One person who actually knew one of the victims. The attitude in the Port of Oregon, where Roseburg is completely different. There are some facts here. There is no gun show loophole. There is a loophole if there is a private party in the same state as the other private party who's buying it. If you're a federally licensed firearms dealer, and almost all of those gun shows have those people selling the guns, you have to do the background check. If you're a private party hanging around the fringes of the gun show and you have a private sale, there's no background check. That's the sum total of the loophole. I don't know how you police 350 million firearms and private sales back and forth. I don't think you can have a bureaucracy that would do that. As for gun violence, it is down 49% since 1993. Until the last couple of years, these mass shootings were continuing to go down. They reached their high point actually in the early 1990s. So of course these are horrible and tragic events. But to actually believe that we are going to stop these kind of massacres, given the fact there are 350 million guns in this country and they're easily obtainable, I think you're basically talking about a bureaucracy that has never accomplished anything like that in the history of this country.
Gail?
This White House, after the Newtown tragedy, put through 23 executive orders, none of which would have stopped these mass shootings from happening. And I think it's important that we need to broaden the discussion, not just to gun violence, but violence in general. It's unacceptable. And over 90% of violent crime in the United States happens without a firearm being involved. And anything when you're putting burdens on something, you have to understand what the unintended costs would be. There are 2.2 to 2.5 million defensive gun uses a year. So if you're taking away people's right to defend themselves, to choose to defend themselves, then you're going to have unintended consequences from that of defensive gun uses that will be less likely to happen. There will be a decrease in defensive gun uses.
Well, if people go through the legal means, they can have a gun. We're not saying get the guns out of people's hands. We're saying that, you know, everyone has a legal right to have a gun. But if you're mentally unstable, if you're a former criminal,
right to have a gun. Felons don't.
Well, if you're if you're an American citizen, you have a right to bear arms, okay? We understand that. No one's saying get the guns out of American homes for self-defense. We're saying criminals, and I have to push back on you. There's been a lot of research on these gun shows, and there's a lot of illegal gun. So I'm from Arizona. My family are NRA members. My mom was an endorsed NRA candidate. I understand guns. I'm from a gun home. I'm not saying get the guns out of people's homes.
But you're putting undue burdens.
Okay, so let's look at Australia. Let's look at Australia.
If you're a federally licensed firearms dealer at a gun show, you have to conduct the background check.
But how many are federally licensed?
The vast majority.
That's actually untrue.
No,
and there's been several investigations regarding that,
if
especially in
there's
Arizona.
a private party that is selling a gun to another private party, there is no background check, and I don't think there's any way that you can possibly police that.
Well, then what happened in Australia?
How would you police a private
way.
party selling to another private party?
Well, for instance, in states where there are tighter, they've closed out these loopholes, guess what? Gun violence has gone down. With the exception of Chicago, which everyone likes to use, and that is because the states surrounding Chicago have smuggled in illegal guns into creating gang violence.
You have yet to answer my point that if you put more undue burdens on the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms to defend yourself, that you are going to have a decrease in the 2.2 to 2.5 million defensive guns.
No one's saying that. If you get a license and if you get a license and if you go and you obtain a gun legally, no one's preventing you from defending yourself.
No, all we're talking about.
Excuse me, almost all of these massacres happen in places that are gun-free zones where it is illegal to carry the gun. Name me one place.
Okay.
And these massacres.
Tucson, Arizona, Safeway parking lot.
That's
down the street
the
from my house.
exception.
Oh, really?
The second one is?
There's
one
mass shooting a day.
You can't give me a second example because there is none.
The
FBI we'll try to find some more examples. Nobody can look it up during the break. Meanwhile, it's probably safe to say that GOP presidential hopeful Dr. Ben Carson would not support Mr. Obama's executive order for background checks. In the last week alone, Dr. Carson, who has been held up at gunpoint before, told CNN's Wolf Blitzer that if there were no gun control laws in Nazi Germany, 6 million Jews might not have been slaughtered. Carson explores gun control further in his new book, A More Perfect Union. Here he is with our own Steve Malzberg.
The Second Amendment is so crucial, and you know, I wrote about it pretty extensively in this new book. You know, it was Daniel Webster who said America would never experience tyranny because the people are armed. I think people will come away with a full understanding of how the executive branch is supposed to work as opposed to what's been happening lately, and a very good understanding of what the real powers of the legislative branch are, which they are not manifesting right now, and they need to, including judicial oversight.
And you can watch more of Steve Malzberg's one-on-one sit-down with Dr. Ben Carson tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's right after this show. And we always want to know what you think. Who is your pick for the 2016 presidential nomination? More votes, or at least polls, seem to be going in Mr. Carson's favor. So tell us your opinion by voting in our online poll right now at newsmaxpolls.com. That's newsmaxpolls.com. Coming up next, is Donald Trump responsible for Kevin McCarthy dropping out of the race for Speaker of the House? Maybe, maybe not. Stay tuned.